Just the other day, I'm standing in my kitchen and the light is on in the basement. I'm looking in the general direction of the basement door and I see a shadow pass across the light that's showing from under the door. I double take and sure enough, the shadow passes again. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out and I grab my buck knife just in case there's someone squatting and I need to protect myself. I open the door and there's nothing visible that could have made the shadow. I go further downstairs and take a left. To the right is my boiler room. I check the closets that I have there for storing random crap, as some of the stuff is on the floor. And out of the corner of my eye, I see her. It's my dead grandma come back to haunt me. She's standing, kind of floating in the boiler room doorway, and I fucking sprint back up the stairs. I shut off the light and lock the door, hoping I don't have to deal with that shit ever again. I haven't been down there since. Growing up, our house was blessed 3 times before it became normal. Stuff would fly off shelves and countertops. The dog would constantly bark at the attic entry as my brother screamed, "Fire monster!" And one night it sounded like someone broke in and was stomping down the stairs, so my dad got his gun ready, and nothing was there. As a child I would see shadows around, but probably had no idea what to think of it. Me and my brother would go to the basement together because we were both too scared to go alone. This is Dead Air. Sometimes you're not as alone in your house as you think. Not our house, but growing up, our neighbor's house was for sure haunted. 3 separate families lived there while we were neighbors. The first family lost the house in 2008, and it was vacant for a year or so before the second family moved in. They left the state a few years later, and the house was empty for a month or 2 again before the third family moved in. Both times the new occupants did not communicate much or at all with the previous owners. All 3 of them described the exact same ghost to us. An old man who would walk into the kitchen and sit down at the table in the morning. One of the women who lived there was so frightened by him that she only went in the house to sleep. She spent all day, every day outside caring for her flowers. The original owner of my childhood home died in my old room. In high school, we had a party and a friend came out from the bathroom pale as hell. He stated that he saw an old woman standing over his shoulder when he looked up at the mirror as he was washing his hands. We found the light on and the water running because he left so fast. He was so freaked out. My friend Carl's last apartment had 2 ghosts. One was a little girl who would play with your hair while you were hanging out in the living room, as well as running along the vertical blinds, making them swing back and forth. The second I never saw or heard, but I did feel him. One night, I locked myself out of my apartment. We lived in the same complex, one building over from each other, so I asked to crash at Carl's place for the night while he went to work, but he told me, "Don't go into his room. There is a male ghost who will tell you that you don't belong in there." His previous roommate had let several friends crash his room, and a tall black shadow opened the door and said, "Get out," to all of them. Freaked them the hell out. So here I am on the couch in the living room, head on the end of the couch that looks down the hall to the bedrooms and bathroom. I swear I was being watched. Then it hit me. I needed to pee. And the bathroom is right across the hall from Carl's bedroom. Fantastic. So I slowly creeped down the hall, and about 5 feet from my goal, I said, "Hey man, I just need to use the bathroom." Then it felt like a cloud of energy got pulled back into the bedroom, despite the door being closed. So I did my thing and hauled ass back to the couch, but I put my head on the other end of the couch. Nothing outstanding, but just a really creepy vibe. On the positive side, at least Carl had someone looking out for him. My old house had something that would peek around the basement staircase. The stairs were enclosed on both sides and faced the back wall of the basement, so all you could see if you opened the door was the wall at the bottom of the stairs. Sometimes you'd see a head poke around the wall for a split second, or you'd see someone quickly walk by when you knew both people who lived down there, me and my brother, were upstairs. Yes, we thoroughly checked the basement for secret homeless guys. Most of it was fully finished, so there wasn't really anywhere a person could hide. Around the time I was 6, my mom and pops left to go south for vacation and left my teen sister in charge of me and my 8-year-old brother. My sister called her boyfriend, now husband, over to spend a few nights with us. We already knew our house was freaky, so we all slept in the living room. But early one morning, while everyone was asleep, I got up to go to the bathroom. The living room is connected to the kitchen, and the kitchen leads to the bedrooms and the bathroom. As I entered the kitchen, there was a guy standing on my dining room table, engulfed in flames. He was dead-ass lit on actual fire. He was screaming and reacting in agony, but there was no noise coming from him. Just silence. I ran back to the living room and jumped on the couch and hid under the covers until I fell asleep. Also in the same house, I experienced running into a guy with a bright hat and trench coat, but he had no facial features. It was just white. He disappeared before my eyes as quick as he startled me. We found random crucifixes on doorknobs. We aren't Catholic. One morning my sister woke up and everything that was in the attic was in her bedroom. She had attic access in her bedroom. Mom was shocked. Sister was lazy. Dad was out of the country. I didn't do it. Explain that. We realized there was something else in our home after we moved into this 100-year-old house. Anytime I went downstairs while my daughter was napping, I would hear it running through the house. Several times I thought it was my cheeky toddler that had woken up. I figured out it only happened when I left her alone upstairs sleeping, and I firmly believed it was just a small child spirit checking on her. It still creeped me the fuck out. I came back upstairs one day and told it how I knew it was worrying about the baby and checking in on her, but that I would never go further away than the yard. That I appreciated that it cared, but it was actually making me really scared. I said that if she was ever in actual danger, that I would absolutely appreciate its help if I didn't realize. But otherwise, it was only making me worried. I only ever heard those footsteps once more. In the first few days, I brought my second baby home from the hospital. I think my little friend was just reminding me that it would watch this baby for me too. My parents bought a 110-year-old house about 10 years ago, and it feels like everybody but me has had a paranormal experience in the house. My parents said they've seen a short, kinda chubby ginger kid appear at random spots in the house, sometimes just standing in the washer/dryer room and vanishing. Sometimes they'd see him at the top of the stairs and he'd walk towards my room, hooray, and disappear. Eventually, my parents were tired of it, so they had my grandfather, who is a very Christian guy, come and bless the house, and the appearances stopped. My brother has talked about staying up late at night and hearing someone walk up the stairs, which are very old, so they are very squeaky, walk to his closed door, jiggle the doorknob. The house had original doors, so there was a quarter turn of play in the knobs, a bunch, then stop and walk back down the steps and stop. There was no sound of a door opening or closing. They just stopped at the bottom of the steps. My mum has also described seeing something peek out from around corners at her as she's sitting watching TV at night. She thinks it's probably just her slowly falling asleep and seeing things, but it is still unsettling for her. There was a period of time where the mudroom door would kind of flex randomly, like there had been a change of air pressure. This usually happens whenever someone opens an outside door and closes it, but nobody ever was near a door, or the doors were locked. Probably just some weird phenomena caused by an old house, but still creepy. And yet here I am, who probably spent the most time up and alone in the middle of the night in that house, not seeing or hearing anything that wasn't explainable from night terrors and sleep paralysis, which I've always had at multiple houses. We live in an old farmhouse that used to be a boarding house for farm laborers. My 4-year-old son was upstairs in his room, and my wife could hear him talking to someone. She asked him who he was talking to. He said, "Alice. She used to work here and feed the men, but she died because she couldn't breathe." We lived in a house that was haunted when I was a kid, and I saw a grown man appear and disappear. The only thing I could really make out was that he was wearing plaid pants. My uncle had an experience where a little girl asked him to come inside through the window to play. He thought it was my sister and didn't think much of it, but it turned out my sister wasn't home that day. There was nobody it could have realistically been. There was always a weird feeling in my sister's room. When you walk into the room, everything just feels unnaturally still. Like no sound, no movement in the air, no nothing. Everything was stagnant. You know how you have a sixth sense if someone is watching you. That's how it felt like, coupled with the complete absence of life. I used to have a reoccurring nightmare where I would walk in that room and something spooky would happen. The first time, it was a doll that stood in the center of the room and whispered the words "red polka dots" over and over again. The supernatural spooky thing would vary, but it was always in that room. The property I live on was, long ago, a cotton plantation. On multiple occasions I've looked out the window and seen the field filled with cotton pickers, still picking. My childhood home was definitely haunted. I have a drawing potentially made by a ghost. I can feel it when there's a presence somewhere. There's a palpable sense of being watched. A tension and paranoia in the air that lingers and can even simmer into full-blown terror. It makes you feel very vulnerable. When I was a child, I remember seeing glowing red eyes hanging in the air in my dark living room. I thought our house had werewolves or vampires. There was a phase in 3rd grade when glowing orbs would hang out in my room for several minutes at a time, which I interpreted as aliens. My child mind was trying to make sense of things, but I definitely had a fear of the dark, specifically in our house. Most places were fine in the dark, but in our house I always felt like I was being watched by something with malicious or, at best, neutral intentions. I had a cousin stay at our house one summer while most of us were on vacation between 7th and 8th grade. My cousin Billy was helping my dad with various projects. One night, my cousin was going to bed in one bedroom, later dubbed the spooky room. Outside in the dark, he saw a figure leave our garage and enter our house. My dad, right? "Billy, Billy, Billy, help me!" My cousin heard my father shouting. Billy rushed to check on my father. My father had been sleeping and was irritated by Billy's presence. Billy went back to bed, only to hear it again. "Billy, Billy, Billy, help, help, help!" Again, Cousin Billy rushed to check on my father, who was fine and confused by Billy's urgency. Billy slept on the couch that night. I didn't learn about this until years later. A couple of years later, my brother moves away to college, and I move into his old bedroom, the spooky room. It's my freshman year of high school. I was always particularly creeped out by this room. But hey, new changes are often intimidating. One morning, I wake up to see a skull perfectly drawn on the dust on the window, across from where my head lies when I sleep. This was the layer of dust facing the inside of the room, not the outside. No one had access to the room except me and my parents, who are not pranksters by any means. I show my mom and wipe it away. A couple weeks later, I'm studying in that bedroom. It's night and the lights are on, so the windows turn into mirrors. I look up from my bed towards that skull window, and I see in the reflection a white silhouette standing behind me. I hold my gaze for maybe 10 seconds, just trying to grasp what I'm looking at. I eventually turn my head around and see nothing. I look back at the window and see nothing in the reflection. I sleep on the couch for the next few nights. A couple more weeks later, I'm lying in bed, listening to a late-night radio show. Lights are off. Looking through that same skull window, I see a similar white silhouette outside, stride past my window. I sleep on the couch for several more nights. Over the course of weeks, I see more things drawn on the dust of the windows. Generally, it's scribbles and shapes. I'm scared they might be some sort of curse or something, so I wipe them away. Out of curiosity, I put a sticky note on the window that says, "Please write below." Several days later, a perfect circle appears around the note, as if someone had put the base of a paint can up against the surface. This wasn't like the finger drawings I'd seen earlier, but one drawing did really stand out. I decided to recreate it in MS Paint before I wiped it away. Over the years, I've shared this with friends and colleagues, and they mostly come to the same conclusion as I did before I tell them my interpretation. But yeah, for the majority of high school, I slept with the light on. I avoided that side of the house like the plague. Little things here and there, but nothing huge. Until it's senior year of high school. I'm in the living room with my mother watching TV, and the clothes dryer finishes. This dryer is directly down the hallway from the spooky room. I suck it up and head over to empty the machine, getting my usual feeling of immense dread and paranoia as I enter that side of the house. I bend over and start unloading the laundry, and my mind goes blank, and I lose control over my motor functions. My arms go limp, and beyond my control, my body stands up, and I hear a masculine voice take a deep breath and hiss in my ear. I immediately regained control of my body and IGTFO. Around that time period, my aunt comes to stay with us for a month or two. She has no idea what I've experienced there, but literally on her first day there, the bathroom door slams hard on her, and she immediately has us smudge the house to ward off whatever's there. Edited to add, most people who've seen the drawing, myself included, think it's a diagram. It's 5 figures, a zygote, possibly an infant, an adult with a baby, an elderly person with a cane, and lastly, a soul ascending. We moved in about 5 years ago. When we moved in the past, owners told us that someone died of lung cancer in the house. When we first moved in, just about every night we would hear banging on the walls. Either that or we would smell fresh smoke. It's calmed down since then, like the banging on the walls completely stopped. But us smelling fresh smoke never did. We don't smoke. Also, every once in a while, smoke alarms will randomly go off. My house is super haunted, but it's too many little instances to put into one story. I guess I'll just go with the most recent one. A few nights ago, I heard running upstairs, despite being home alone. I thought it was my cat, but then he came downstairs, and the running continued. I was a little spooked, but it's not the worst thing that's happened in this house. The running lasted for quite a while, plus a few knocks. The next morning I was cleaning upstairs in that room, and my cat crawled into a box of fabric. I thought he was being cute, so I said, "Aww," and started to pull out my phone to take a picture. While I was still reaching for my phone, I heard a mocking "ah" right behind me. I completely froze and just let myself process it for a few seconds before checking the room. Obviously, I was still alone. That one spooked me a little. This sort of thing only happened to me once, but left an impression on me. I am not sure if it was an apparition or if I dreamed it. I never told anyone the truth, as I fear I would not be believed. My father and his brother Gary were lifelong dairy farmers in central Wisconsin. We lived close by, and labor was traded during harvests. As I got older, he would send me saying, "You have to go and help at Gary's today." I grew up and took over the farm, and cousin Mike took over for his father, Gary. Gary died about 15 years ago. Mike sold the dairy herd and found other employment. I rent his land. My father passed away in 2013. In 2014, I sold the dairy herd. It was an October night in Wisconsin. My cousin Mike started a fire in the wood-fired furnace in the basement and went to bed. His sister had just gotten out of a bad relationship and was living there too. She arrived home from her job at about midnight, added some wood to the furnace and went to bed too, transitioning over to all crops. In the fall of 2015, I was driving around the state looking at used equipment. What I told everyone is this: passing through the nearest large town about 25 miles away, I decided to stop and get a meal. Seeing a movie playing that I wanted to see, I stopped in to see it, then stopped at a local bar and had a few soft drinks before returning home, passing by Mike's place on the way home at 3 a.m. I saw flames coming from out of the chimney and smoke coming from the outside basement door. I dialed 911 and ran in yelling for them to get up. There was very little smoke in the upstairs of the house. Mike and I went downstairs and found an area about 3 feet square above the furnace on fire. We put it out with a fire extinguisher and water. The fire department arrived to put out the chimney fire. There was very little smoke damage to the house and minimal repairs, but a few more minutes, and the fire would have burned up into the kitchen. The truth is, I got home about 10:30 p.m. and went to bed, sometime a little before 3 a.m. My father, wearing his bib overalls, something he never wore after his retirement, opened my room door, turned on the light, and said, "Get up. You have to go and help out at Gary's." I remember saying, "In the morning." He then put on his most authoritative voice and said, "No, right now." I sat bolt upright in bed. My room door was open, and the light and the hallway light was on. I tried to brush it off as imagination, but I knew I had closed the door and turned off the lights. Knowing with the adrenaline rush and doubts I would not get back to sleep, I decided to dress and check on Mike's place. And that's when I saw the fire and smoke. Like I said, I never told anyone the truth, as I fear no one would have believed me. Idiot. My father died in this house. I was driving home one night at like 2 a.m. down a rural mountain range and heard my dead grandma say "slow down" from the passenger seat. Thought it was a bit weird, backed off the gas a bit. Then in a really urgent loud tone, "Slow down." I hit the brakes pretty hard, went round a downhill blind corner next and found a huge cow standing right in the middle of my lane. Any faster and I would have totaled my car. 1,000,000% believe Nana saved my life that night. When I was little, I had a loft bed with a desk underneath. I've always been a pretty heavy sleeper. I could fall asleep at a concert. So it was strange when I began waking up at 3 in the morning every morning. What was even more strange were the noises coming from the attic, shuffling, knocking, boxes moving. My 9-year-old brain rationalized it as an animal or bird that had gotten in. After a few weeks of terrible sleep, I decided to knock back on my ceiling the shave and a haircut pattern because I was bored and hadn't interacted with whatever was in the attic. I waited in silence for a few minutes until I was about to fall back asleep, and then I heard it. From the ceiling, a foot from my face, it knocked back the pattern. Every night when I woke up, I'd knock and sometimes get a response. It gradually stopped over the years, but I still wake up at 3 a.m. every night. It's weird, but it only happens in my room. I sleep fine in hotels and other houses. 13 years later, and I've just been getting weird vibes around my house. I feel like I'm being watched. I sometimes hear someone saying my name, most notably before bed, and whatever said it is very close to my ear. I can feel their breath as they whisper, and it freaks me out so much that it takes hours to get back to sleep. The shuffling in the attic also started up again, but I don't want to knock back anymore. There's a lot of weird shit that happens. Things get moved. My dogs and cats stare at the same blank spot. But these are just what's been currently happening. I just don't know what to do anymore. It wasn't my house that was haunted, but my grandparents'. There was an airing cupboard that was like too cold to be in their overly hot house. You could feel the cold radiating from outside it. My bro dared me to go in it once, and once I was inside, there was just this lack of noise. The cars outside went quiet. I couldn't hear my own breathing. When I called out for my bro, I could feel my voice vibrating in my throat, but nothing came out. It was fucking terrifying. When I pulled open the door, my brother was standing there, white as a ghost. We ran downstairs and never went back upstairs again. I never asked him what upset him. Honestly, I don't want to know.
Apart from specters appearing at random intervals, the most chilling was the night before Christmas. For background, the spirit in our home had proved to be very possessive of me and kept attempting to keep me from my boyfriend and win my attention, maybe even affection. Every night when he would be working into the wee hours, I fell asleep in our room with the bedroom door unlocked to grant him easy access. Every night when he got home, it was firmly locked. I heard him calling for me in other rooms while showering and would emerge to find the house empty and my boyfriend at the gas station or in the backyard. It would sit next to me on the bed, appear to me while bathing, rap on the wall when I was alone, always after my attention. My then boyfriend was deployed, and I was just starting on a glass of wine, settling onto the living room couch. We had decorated for Christmas right before he left, but I was lonely and hadn't heard from him in a day or two. A few tears slipped, and I heard a sound. No branch had moved. There was no breeze or fan, but a glass ball had gently dropped from the tree onto the wood floor without breaking. I stared at it as it stayed in place for a second under the tree. Then it slowly rolled 4 feet in my direction, over the lip of the thick, heavy rug, which shouldn't have been possible, and stopped directly in front of my feet. The first of many gifts to cheer me up. I received a vintage children's card, a queen of spades with torn edges and yellowed paper shortly after. I don't know where it came from. It appeared one day, and when I would throw it out, it would appear somewhere else. The garage, the windowsill, under the bed. One time my boyfriend threw it out. As if in angry retaliation, when I was in the bath that evening, the spirit of a woman sat on my chest, pressing me into the water. I couldn't move. It was like a night terror, but with risk of drowning. She had such a twisted, hateful face. After a moment of clawing at the sides of the tub, I was released. We sold the house earlier this year and moved across the country. We found out that the previous owner had been a depressed, manic hoarder who kept animals she seemingly abused in the home. I don't know what had happened to her, if it's guaranteed she died in the house or what. But the spirit that dwelled there was the unhappiest thing I'd ever encountered. I almost feel sorry for it.
So we have this mirror in our front living room, and when I was a kid, I had my best friend stay over, and he looked at the mirror and said he saw an old guy sitting on the couch. I said it might have been my grandpa and told him he was a racist dickhead. My friend is black and grandpa was Native American but hated every race. Years later, I'm still friends with my friend and all his family members. They were like a second family. Well, his brother, who was about a year younger than him, comes over. But it had been a while, so he decided to stay the night so we could play some PlayStation. Well, wouldn't you know, he looks in the mirror and sees the old guy too and gets freaked out. I tell him what I told my friend. I'm pretty convinced my grandpa likes to fuck with people, and he's cremated in a cabinet in the living room. After my friend left the next day, I went up to the cabinet and told him to fuck right off. A house that my mom, my stepdad, and myself lived in years ago was once a meth lab where many people died in an explosion. This house always gave off creepy feelings. First day we were there, I noticed blood smeared on the back door, and I thought nothing of it, thinking maybe it was just mud. But this was in the dead of winter. Next, I was woken up in the middle of the night by gibberish being spewed into my ears and a hard, firm tug on my leg that couldn't have been a spasm because it pulled my entire body across my bed. We'd all wake up with several scratches on us. We didn't own a cat, but we had a Boston Terrier that had never scratched us before living there, so we didn't think it was her. Me and my mom had been hissed at by something. Once was when she was going to bring laundry in the basement when she was home alone, and she told me she screamed out loud, "Fuck this!" and went into the dining room and immediately called my stepdad and tried to get him to come home from work. The inside window of the dining room decided to explode at that moment, leaving the outside one was intact. After we moved out, our distant cousins moved in, and they told us they experienced similar things before we ever mentioned having anything happening when we lived there. Couldn't pay me enough money in the world to get me to live there again. I connected a webcam to my computer way back when I was a kid. In the middle of the night, the camera was trained in the hallway. All of a sudden, the hallway lights flicker on and you see a dark figure run into my brother's room. 30 minutes later, you see my brother walk down the hallway himself, going towards his room. He had been playing on the family desktop all night. Really freaked me out in the morning when we reviewed the footage. I lived in this house for nearly 20 years before anything happened. One night I woke up and felt a male presence. I looked and saw a tall shadow figure in the corner of my room. It didn't do anything but stand there. This happened a couple more times before I told my mom, who said, "Yeah, there's spirits in their house, but they're good spirits." About 4 months go by, and it wasn't happening as much anymore. One night, I woke up to this figure leaning over my bed in my face. I freaked out and jumped up, screaming, but nothing came out. It was straight up those scenes in the movies where people wake up right before they get stabbed. Every time I have friends over, I would hear psst, psst, like someone is near my ear. Literally, every time. There are times also when friends would tell me someone is walking outside the house. At midnight, one midnight, I was out in the kitchen with a friend. We were talking, but we were on opposite corners of the kitchen. Suddenly we both stopped. I saw a shadow walk from another corner behind him, then disappear in the dark living room. When I looked at my friend, he was looking at me like we saw the same thing. I was watching movies with friends in our living room, which has a high ceiling and opens up to the family room on the second floor. I heard my brother's room door open. I heard him call my name. I even shouted, "Yes." Then I heard footsteps running from their room towards the stairs and down to the kitchen. I was waiting for him, but no one showed up at the bottom of the stairs. The next morning I asked him about it, and he said he was asleep. Usually these things only happen when I am with friends. I usually stay awake till morning because my college degree requires me to, but I never experienced anything when I am alone.
My aunt always tells me I have a friend in our house who doesn't enjoy others' company. My old aunt used to complain that the next door neighbors were making all kinds of noise at 3 a.m. Number one, I doubted she could hear them since her hearing was really bad. And number two, those were just a nice family with 2 little kids, so I doubted they would be up making noise that late. When she died, before we sold the house, we pulled up the carpet, and there was a D sort of etched into the nice wood floors, and no matter how much we sanded it, it would not go away. Then the realtor was in the house taking photos alone in the house. She was in a room in the back of the house with a bank of windows and had closed the door of this room to get the entire view. She went to leave the room and could not get out. The door was not lockable, and she had to call out the window to people on the sidewalk to come into the house through the unlocked front door to let her out. The door that she was stuck behind opened easily. They even tested it again, and it opened without a problem. We talked to the new owners after they'd been in the house for a year or more and asked how they liked the house. They said my aunt finally seemed happy with them and hasn't been haunting them as much as before.
We rented a 2-story house with a basement a few years back. Every single morning at roughly 8:30 a.m., we would hear footsteps going down the stairs from the 2nd floor down to the basement. Eventually, we found a hidden room in the basement. The first time we entered it, my wife's phone went into super static over loudspeaker mode for no apparent reason, then stopped. When I got married, I had a friend come over the night before, and we smoked some spice, which is synthetic weed, or so it was sold as. Turns out it's much worse, and I'm very glad it didn't kill me. He told me about a ghost in the house that was following him around and telling him to leave, and leaving physical scratch marks on him. That same night, we heard a knock on the 2nd floor balcony, and we went to investigate. We could both very clearly see a corporeal form or a ghostly visage, though we couldn't make out any specifically human anything other than its general human outline. Honestly, looking at it looked kind of like an almost invisible lightning globe thing you can get from Spencer's for $20. But that was literally walking around. Now, this isn't something that just I could see, or that just he could see. We could both see him in the same place, at the same time. He asked us if he could come inside. I already know, majorly bad idea. We were high, and we said yes. We watched him come inside and sit down. We put on a movie. We would routinely look at him and then each other, both verifying that the other could very clearly see him. He was still there, and we were both seeing the same thing. To be clear, 2 very separate people were able to see and speak to the same ghostly being at the same time. Again, we could both see him and could watch him move around. I have heard of mass hallucinations before, and I can't help but feel like this could be that situation. We were high after all. However, this was in a known haunted house, and 2 separate people were able to point out his exact location, completely separate from the other at any point in time, and there was never any disagreement on where he was. I can't stress this enough. We both thought we were going crazy and hallucinating at the time, and thus would each check the ghost location with the other at random points in time, and at no point in time were either of us wrong. We were both very clearly able to see this thing the entire time. He only left after we went to bed
TLDR, ghost footsteps every day, messed up electronics with no clear cause. Ghost visually observed by multiple observers at the same time for an extended period of time.
I used to live in a basement apartment when I was in grad school. The landlady lived in the main house, and while she herself was super nice and cool, her house always felt really off to me. However, she charged a reasonable amount of rent, and I was only 2 miles from school. About a week or 2 after I moved in, I had gone to bed and the apartment was pitch black at night. If my landlady ever wanted to speak to me, I would hear the doors above the stairs unlock and she would call out to me. One night I heard movement on the steps, but I didn't hear her unlock the doors, and it was probably 2 in the morning. She certainly didn't call me saying she needed to talk to me. I hear these heavy steps descending the stairs, but I'm so scared that I shrink further in my bed to hide. The floor begins to creak towards my door, and then nothing for a few seconds. I'm not sure if it is safe to relax and go back to bed. Then I hear the doorknob start to turn. My fear makes me so scared that I pull the covers over my head to hide. I prayed the whole time under the covers. The next thing I know, it's finally morning. I stayed in that apartment for 2 years. When it was my graduation, I slept in a hotel because there was no room for my family to sleep. That night in the hotel was the first restful sleep I had in what felt like forever. Our house was haunted. The main thing was the kids' toys would get rearranged, but in ways the kids couldn't possibly do. For example, there was a music box / shape sorter thing. You had to put the blocks in to make it work. One day, the blocks were just gone. Nowhere. We lived in a tiny house, and I was super meticulous about cleaning up the playroom and making sure all the pieces of everything were where they belonged. It was a big deal to me. So one evening, I'm cleaning the play area, and I put the box away, and the little blocks were lost. I tore the room apart, searching for them, looked around the house. I checked everywhere. The next day I walked by the play area, and the blocks were stacked on the very top of the shelves where no one could reach. Another time it was a toy that had plastic boulders. Again, putting the toys away, the balls are nowhere. I do the same searching as before and finally give up. A couple of days later, I'm taking the baby to put her to bed, and they were just sitting in the middle of the floor in the nursery. A lot of things like that happened, almost always with toys. But the other crazy thing was that a lot of the pictures of my daughter we took in that house has a little shine right above her head and to the right. Nobody else. Once I was walking down this parking lot by a beautiful waterfall when my boyfriend at the time, and we both got this really weird feeling like we were being stopped. We pushed against it a little, but then felt it again, so we left. A couple days later, a body was found there. The time of death was the night we were there. I was sitting in the living room watching TV with just me and my mom. The hallway had her and my dad's room at the end. As we're watching, we heard someone talking that didn't sound like it came from the TV. We muted it and heard it coming from the bedroom. The TV wasn't on in there. We both cautiously walked towards the bedroom and heard giggling, which freaked us the fuck out. It was coming from the closet, which was open, but we couldn't see anything in there. There was clearly a child's voice talking, but it was weird. Like words were spoken, but they weren't words. It was almost like something in The Sims where it sounded like words but was not. Thank God it was in her room and not mine.
A pastor died of a heart attack in the house I grew up in before we owned it. When I was a baby, I was sick with croup. Apparently in the night, I was having trouble breathing and was beginning to suffocate. The ceiling light fixture in my nursery fell out of the ceiling and smashed on the floor, waking my parents, who found me choking. My parents are absolutely convinced the pastor's ghost had intervened and saved my life.
Growing up, I used to live in a fairly large 2-story house. I'm pretty sure it was built in the early 1900s because when we moved in during the mid-90s, my dad told me it was 100 years old at that point. It was a really cool house with a huge backyard, but there were some really creepy parts. The basement, of course, was dark, unfinished, and had 2 small rooms facing each other. One of the rooms was creepy. It had these weird dividers on the floor made of plywood, kind of how you would imagine stalls in a horse stable, but on a much smaller scale. On the landing heading to the second floor was a big door about halfway up the wall that led to an attic space. The door wasn't attached in any way, it was just leaned up against the jamb. This attic was creepy because on the walls were newspaper clippings of people with their eyes scratched out. Like that is some super cliche horror movie thing, but seeing it in real life was spooky. There were always a lot of weird noises in that house. It was old, so it's to be expected. We would hear creaks and knocks, sometimes the occasional bang, but we would rarely see anything really strange. It didn't seem like a haunted house at all, that is, until one day my younger brother and my cousin were playing with a webcam, making a video on Windows Movie Maker. In the video, my brother starts adjusting the camera, and as soon as he moves his hand away, you can very clearly see something moving behind them, which quickly ducks behind them and disappears. My brother didn't notice, but my cousin did. He quickly turned around to check, but didn't see anything. We watched that video over and over, and I eventually noticed that you can see whatever it is actually materialize while my brother is moving the camera around. Whatever it was, it looked kind of like the head of a bat, but about the size of a fist. It wasn't the house that was haunted, it was the fucking Pinocchio puppet. The thing was made of wood and looked like someone tried to convert the Disney version to polygons. The cheeks and all had sharp corners and points. One day the air conditioning was off. The puppet was hung under an AC fan, and it turned to me and started reaching out. Then the air kicked on and it went limp. We gave it back to the person who had given it to me, and one of their walls burned down. Never saw it again. In my house, it's chairs. I have one of those rocking recliners. I live in an 80-year-old house. Every once in a while I will see it rocking slightly for a few seconds. The weirdest part is when my coonhound will just stand and stare at the chair with her tail wagging. I grew up in a city house. My mother's entire farm family, 4 brothers and 2 sisters, would all stay there when visiting the doctors, or if a family member was in the hospital. Their last days were usually spent at the house I grew up in. So catching something out of the corner of your eye, or random shadows, or creaky steps when no one is around, just became normal to me. It freaked my wife out horribly the first couple of times she saw something, although there was never any malice or bad feelings. Eventually, she and the kids got used to it. I lived in this big pre-war building in NYC, and every night after I put my daughter to sleep in her room, I would lay in my bed and watch TV. The way my bed was angled, I could see a sliver of the hallway out of the corner of my eye. I would always see this tall shadow pass by the door, and it would jar me. I would always look over but see nothing after that. After a few years, I got so used to it, I didn't even flinch anymore. In fact, I had honestly started to believe I just had some sort of vision problem that caused me to see the shadow in my peripheral vision. Eventually we moved out, but a week before we did, my daughter and I were just hanging out on my bed one night watching TV. All our boxes were pretty much packed. The whole apartment was ready to go. I was laying on my bed in my usual spot, and my daughter was laying at the foot of the bed, playing with her dolls. Again, my vision problem acted up, and I saw the shadow out of the corner of my eye. I didn't flinch or look over. I hadn't in years. I was so used to it. But all of a sudden, my 8-year-old child goes, "Who was that?" Holy fuck. I jumped up out of the bed and yelled, "You saw that?" You've been listening to Dead Air. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, consider liking the video and subscribing for more. Good night.